Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'd like to feature a conversation I recently recorded with Laura Bordoni. Laura is the newest member of our Executive MBA Program team, and she works closely supporting our students in our class of 2021. She and I recently sat down to talk a little bit more about her background, what attracted her to higher education, what she enjoys about the work that she does, and her advice for prospective students. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Laura Bordoni. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brett. All
right, so we start all these conversations the same way. Tell us about you. Who are you, and what's your background? What did you do before coming to Darden?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so excited to be here and to share a little bit about myself and more about Darden. So I started my career, if I go all the way back, in sales and marketing. So I cut my teeth on cold calling and kind of boots on the ground sales. And I commend people who have built a career there. It wasn't for me, but it was a great experience. I really kind of worked on some of my soft skills out of undergrad. But I wanted to kind of have a more solid business background. So I went back and got my MBA at Chicago Booth, really aiming to kind of focus on finance, accounting, build up a more traditional business background, having, again, focused more on some of my softer skills. But I took a lot of courses while I was there that were also, around managing organizations, things like that, because people are really kind of my passion. And so while I was at Booth, I worked in admissions and career services, and that was the first time I really felt like, gosh, I love this environment. So I put a little bit of a bug in the back of my mind about, do I want to come back here someday? But at the time, I was focused on kind of getting business experience. So I went into management consulting. For a few years, I worked for LEK Consulting out in Chicago, mostly focused on growth strategy. So helping companies think about how to grow. Should we acquire this business? Should we launch into a new product line? How do we grow in this stagnant industry that we're in? Things like that. And so, consulting lived up to everything that I had heard about it. I learned a ton in a really short amount of time. I worked across many different industries, functions. I focused more of my time in the food and beverage and consumer space, which was really fun. One of my last projects was healthy meat sticks. So you get to try fun products and think about interesting real markets, which now as a vegetarian, I I don't think would have been as fun of a project now, but it was pretty cool at the time. And so it was a great experience. Again, you learn so much in consulting. But after a few years, the work-life balance was starting to get to me. And I also was looking for an opportunity to develop relationships a little bit longer term. It can start to feel, you're on to the next client, right? And so I wanted to switch gears and shift over into corporate to see what it was like to be on the other side of the table. So most recently, prior to joining the Darden team, I was with Marriott International at their corporate headquarters. It was, I found a fantastic opportunity to work on an internal consulting team. So there was a few of us that had our MBA and some strategy consulting experience, and we did strategy projects for different teams within corporate at Marriott. Working on things like, what do we do about Airbnb? And what should our new distribution strategy be? And so it was fascinating, and I was really fortunate to be there through the Marriott Starwood merger, which was, really interesting and great from a point standpoint, as I used to be a Starwood person. So I was excited about the merger when I was working at Marriott. And I love Marriott. It's a fantastic company. But I kind of felt this draw back to higher ed. So that's where I was most recently. A little bit about me.
So you mentioned you had some exposure to higher ed when you were in business school, and so it sort of put this bug in the back of your mind, and you're obviously here working at Darden.
Yeah.
What appealed to you about higher education?
Yeah. So a couple things. I would say first, overall, I really love the environment of sort of enthusiasm and passion that people have when they're at this inflection point in their lives, particularly I think in an MBA program. People are just really open. They're open to career changes, to personal development, they're thinking about so much, and that just translates into a buzz. There's that I haven't found or recreated in other industries, and I really wanted to be a part of that time in people's lives where they're just excited, and I think there's just so much opportunity there, and so that's what drew me to higher ed. And when I started to think about where would I want to play, living in DC, I've always admired the University of Virginia from afar. I've always admired Darden as just a fantastic program that creates real leaders out in the business world. And so that was sort of the first door that I started knocking on when I started to think about the transition, getting back into higher ed in a real role.
So let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing currently here. You're getting to work with students a lot, which is great. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, this is a time in our students' lives where they're dreaming, aspiring. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people think about executive MBA programs as very transactional. Right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's gotten to a point in their career where they realize they need the MBA, they need to check a box, and so they decide to go back to school. I think our experience is maybe a little bit different than that, at least with the people who choose Darden in terms of what they're looking for, mm-hmm. in terms of their experience. So how do you support students? What's your current role here?
Yeah, sure. So right now I am leading student affairs and engagement for our class of 2021. And so if I think about what that means in my role, I think about it in sort of two categories. The first is there's helping the individual student. In a lot of cases, that's on the academic side through academic advising. So students, may come my way if they're struggling with a particular course. They need some tips and tricks for making sure that they're contributing. The case method is new for a lot of folks, and that is a skill to develop. And so, I can help people brainstorm in that sense. Thinking about what elective should I take to support the career path I'm interested in. So a lot of those more academic questions. But then there's also the life stuff that happens. Our students come to us, particularly in the executive program. They have full lives already, and then they're adding this full-time program on top of it. And so some of my role is helping people when they may be struggling with work, life, school balance. Or, they have a personal crisis come up, and sometimes they just need someone to listen, to talk to, or to triage if they need resources from the university that, we want to help them, get through this experience and thrive, not just survive. And so I like to think about my role in that sense. And, as I said, my MBA was so transformational for me. Not just because I met my husband, but because, like I said, there's so many opportunities, but that can also be overwhelming. It's exciting, but it can be overwhelming to figure out where should I focus my time? Where should I dive in versus say, you know what, I'm gonna leave that leadership opportunity to someone else. So there's the individual component, and then there's the group component. So part of my role is also thinking about the student experience overall. What are we offering as a program to really make the most of our students' time with us? And, of course, some of that is a big piece of it is their academic experience, but then, what are we doing outside the classroom for them? A lot of students are here to build a strong network. I mean, that's a huge part of getting an MBA. And so, part of my role is thinking about, we're launching a speaker series. We have different clubs and activities. And so, how are we supporting our students outside of the classroom to achieve their goals, whether it be networking, developing themselves as leaders, and so taking a step back and building on, the amazing work the program team has already completed to think about that holistic student experience.
No, that's all great. And hopefully what our podcast listeners are hearing is that, this is not just going to class. There's mm-hmm. a lot that happens here as part of the overall program experience. Obviously Darden is a school very much known for the educational experience, mm-hmm. which I think of as both inclusive of and also more than just the classroom.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
So, we now have 6 or so student organizations mm-hmm. in the Executive MBA program. It's worth noting that we're recording this on a Friday. Later this evening,
yes.
we'll be club night, which when I hear that, I don't necessarily think that.
Club.
I don't think about student clubs, but I think it's kind of funny,
Right.
which is great. We're going to have all the leaders, second-year students coming and talk to the first-year students. I want to sort of get your take on something. So this is, from an admission standpoint, an interesting time of year. So we've got our second-year students and our first-year students. We're putting visitors in both classes, and so we get to see the two classes in close proximity, right? And I was struck during the first weekend residency. You could feel the nerves a little bit for our first-year students. They were quiet, probably a little bit anxious about that first class. They're still learning, as you noted, what it means to be in class. And then you're around the second-year students who are quarter seven, second weekend residency. They are getting ready to start electives pretty soon. And talking, just kind of, much looser.
Or seniors, yeah.
Much looser, exactly. They are the seniors. Obviously, you've been around the first years at this point. What do you see as the big adjustment challenge for people? Obviously, they've been working for a while, but coming back to school. What are some of the things that you've noticed?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and there's a lot to adjust to. I think a few of the things that come to mind, especially as I think about, your observation around nerves, I think that's right. I mean, there's obviously the adjustment back to being in a classroom environment, right? Most folks haven't been in a classroom. And I think a lot of folks, as I mentioned earlier, may not have experienced the case method where you are really teaching one another and, you're expected to contribute. And I think it's a fantastic way to learn. But it's new for some folks to really, need to push themselves to speak up. But I think that ties into my next observation that I think there's an adjustment for our students realizing they are all there for a reason. They bring a ton of value, each uniquely with their own perspective, and they deserve to be here. They should be here. They're future leaders. And I think, we all talk about the imposter syndrome, right? And I think there's that element of, oh my gosh, am I going to really be able to contribute to my class? Should I be here? And, as the admissions team, we know that you guys don't make mistakes. And so I think it's an adjustment for students to gain that confidence, right? That they're here for a reason. We're so excited to have them, and that they have value that they're going to add to their class. And I think that's something that they learn quickly because they start to hear from one another and they start to find that voice. And it's a really supportive environment generally, I would say. And so, I think I'm hoping by Q2, some of that imposter syndrome has faded away and people are used to the case method and they're settling in. So I think those are two big adjustments. I think there's also just purely the balance, the scheduling adjustment for folks, right? Of figuring out when do you meet with your teams, when do you decide, okay, I've got to compartmentalize. I'm just going to spend time with my family right now. And I think that takes time to get into a rhythm. But it's something that our students absolutely figure out along the way, right? Of, okay, I've just got to, prioritize this. And you're never going to do everything perfectly, right? Like, I think we all have to come to terms with that with anything that we're doing, that you do the best you can at a given time. And you have your support network and you lean on that support network as you go. But I think it's an adjustment for sure. They're taking on a lot. And so figuring out how to navigate that is tricky. But again, I think I hope our students will feel more confident and lean on each other over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I've asked students repeatedly on the podcast, when did it all start to click for you, and the answer is typically 5 to 6 months, quarter three, which, means that the first couple quarters you're just kind of finding your way.
Yeah.
And try to encourage students to stay patient during that period. You have a highly successful group of people who, and their day jobs, there's very little that they do that they don't know how to do and really execute on, and no real speed bumps for them. They're functioning at a high level when they come here, and then all of a sudden you're put in decision analysis, global economics, being asked big questions about where things are going in the professional advancement course, and trying to juggle life and work and school. Those are all hard things. How do you encourage people to stay patient and just kind of hang in there? Because it's about resilience as much as anything.
It is.
Right?
No, and I was actually just having that exact conversation with a student who is eager to jump in and take on everything. And it's also on my mind because this morning during homeroom, I'll be sharing some of our student leadership opportunities. So, we have many different opportunities for our students to take on leadership roles, whether it's being a class representative, a social chair, a club president. And I'm really excited to share those opportunities with the class. But I also know that it will, folks will feel like, I want to do all of these things, and how do I tackle everything? So, I think my advice to students, and this is so hard to do, but to try to carve out time here and there to take a step back and really think about, why are you here? What are your priorities while you're here? And I think that helps ground you in, okay, I'm here because I'm trying to achieve these specific goals. This one piece may not help me meet that goal. I'm gonna, I'm gonna leave that to someone else. Or, gosh, this opportunity is really important to me, and so I'm gonna dive in here. And also, so take those opportunities to think about why you're here and prioritize. But to remind yourself too that, we talk about 21 months goes really fast, but it's also 21 months. You have time, and what I think we tend to underestimate is the power of kind of taking time actually to network and to just get to know your classmates along the way, because so much, as I said, of my experience in the value post MBA has been in that network. And so, I like to encourage students, look, I know you want to take it all on. I know you want to get straight A's and do everything, but part of the value of being patient is you free up a little bit of time to yourself also to spend that time with your classmates and really get to know them, bond with them, because I think a lot more value and opportunity can come from that, even more so than we can appreciate.
It's a great point. As you might imagine, we talked to a fair number of prospective students, and being in the DC area, for many of our prospective students, the appeal of the location is that it's so convenient.
Yeah.
The thing that we sometimes say is, what is key in this program is presence. So you'll hear from our current students that, when they're at home, they're really at home and they're with their family.
Yeah.
They are focused on being with their family. And when they're at school, they're focused on, being present with their classmates and really soaking up all of these experiences. It's very hard to be in two places and do both effectively. But what we say from an admissions side, I'm curious your thoughts on this, is even if you're here in DC, it's worth thinking about using the hotel room. Yeah. Lodging is included in the cost of the program. Because we have plenty of examples of students who've tried to come to class and go home and come to class and go home. And yes, technically it's possible. But are you having the full program experience, or at least as we conceive of it, sort of immersive weekend residency, getting to know your classmates? And I think that always catches people by surprise on the phone. They're like, really? And it's like, well, how else are you going to create the time and the space to really build these relationships? Yeah. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I would totally agree. Of course, every student needs to do what's right for them and their personal life. And, we have folks with young babies, we have folks with all kinds of different life situations. So, first and foremost, do what you need to do at home. And though I wholeheartedly agree that there's so much happens in those spaces, like you said, where you're just kind of lingering, you're checking into the hotel and you start chatting with someone, or you're just sitting around and everybody else is filtered out and you stumble upon someone who has the exact same kind of entrepreneurial interests that you do, or you just have a laugh. And so I do think that it can be a lot easier for students to really fully immerse themselves in one thing or another, because I remember when I was in consulting, it was easier sometimes being on the road because it was just like, okay, I'm in it. This is what I'm focusing on right now. versus feeling like you're being pulled in a lot of different directions and not giving anybody their full attention. So I think for our students, being here in the residency weekends to the extent they can be, and then going home and then saying, okay, I'm going to leave the classroom behind now and be present at home or at work, I think can be really beneficial for students. It's interesting. During our first quarter, there were actually a couple of students who went home and got suitcases and came back on Friday night and spent the weekend because they realized so many of their local classmates were staying at the hotel. And I think that that bonding is hard to compete with. And I know similarly, we hear from our Gemba students, those who do our global executive MBA, that there's nothing like bonding with people when you're traveling and you spend a full week together. So I would certainly echo that, of course, within the constraints of whatever folks have going on at home.
That's great advice, and I think it feels artificial to people. When I live like 10 minutes away,
yeah, right,
or whatever. But treat it like a business trip, and
exactly.
When you're setting those expectations early, I think it's a lot easier, when you're talking to people about the program and you're talking with your family and your coworkers as to what the program will mean for your presence in their life and your time and all that. Start at that point, to say, like, look, this is really important to me. We're doing this as a family, but for me to get the maximum benefit of the program, this is what I think I need to do. And same applies to the distance learning. I think sometimes prospective students, may think, oh, well, is that kind of like optional? And it's like,
yeah.
No, it's not. Yes, occasionally people have, work conflicts, but when you're setting expectations, help everybody understand that is required. It's a third of the program required. You're going to be online a couple of nights a week, and start there, because the clearer you can be about those expectations, I think the easier it gets. Obviously, you're going to want to stay in communication throughout the program, check in. How do you encourage students? I mean, there's no doubt that, family, personal life, as you're navigating the program, your time increasingly shifts towards school. Other people at home have to sort of pick up more and help out. That can put some stress on the relationship. How do you encourage people to sort of navigate that, have those conversations? I realize that's a tricky question. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. I'm curious, what advice you might give a student who comes and sort of asks about that.
Yeah, I think I do think you're right that it's tricky, and it's going to be unique for every student what works for them. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I have for students is just having a very kind of open line of communication with your support system and with us in the program team, with your faculty. I found that the more students communicate, and whether that's asking for help or just being really honest about where they're at, most of us, our guard comes down, or we want to be helpful. And so I think, one of my first questions to students who are struggling with stress or with balancing things is, what is your support network? How much have you talked to them about what you're going through? Have you talked to your professors? Have you talked to your spouse, your partner, your friends about what you're going through and what you need? Because you'll always, I think, be pleasantly surprised by that there's always more support that people want to give you, and sometimes you feel like you've taken as much as you can, or like you're just really overwhelmed by it. But I think having that open conversation can really make a big difference. I think the other piece of advice, so I think it's thinking about, open communication, asking for help when you need it from any angle. Come talk to the program team, come talk to me, talk to your faculty, to try to figure out that balance. So that's a big piece of it. And then I think, and this is another really hard one, but try not to be so hard on yourself. Like I said earlier, we all struggle with being perfect all the time. And a lot of the folks who are here at Darden are really ambitious and motivated and hold themselves to a very high standard. And we at Darden hold them to a high standard as well, of course. But there are going to be times when certain things have to flex up and down, right? Where you may need to say, gosh, I really need to prioritize this other this other work event or this family event right now, and that's okay. We understand that. Of course, there may be implications if you miss class and things like that. That, like I said, we're going to hold everyone to our high academic and professional standards here. But it's okay if you need to think about trade-offs and find that balance in your life.
So one of the great pieces of advice I think I've heard fairly repeatedly from alumni and current students is think about just carving out time every week. Put it on your calendar like it's a meeting for either your partner, spouse, or a date night. For your family, that's just treated as like non-negotiable. It's like having a meeting or anything else. Just put it on there a few hours. It feels weird to say like, for these 4 hours, I will be spending time with my family, and yes, this is on my calendar. But there's so much value in that, right? It signals to you that it's a priority, to the other people in your life that they're a priority. Because in a world in which you're juggling many things that are all competing to be that number one priority,
right?
You kind of have to be a little bit more scheduled in that way.
I think that's right. And it goes back to, my point earlier about an adjustment period that, I completely agree. I think the students who have the most success are those who are pretty rigorous and disciplined about how they approach the class. So, from 7 to 9 every night, I study, and that's my window. But, from 5 to 7, I'm with my family, no question. Or all day Saturday, I do my schoolwork, but then 5 o'clock Saturday, I'm with the family, or I'm doing what I need to do. I'm going to the gym. I'm taking care of myself or my support network. So I totally agree. I think coming in with a plan or figuring it out as you go, of course, but being disciplined about keeping things separate is a key to succeeding.
Well, one of the challenging things I would say about student affairs is it can sometimes be difficult to gauge how you're being successful, right? It can be a little bit ambiguous at times. You sort of, counseling students, you're helping people individually. Obviously, you're trying to do some macro things too. For you, if you're sort of working with this class, what does success look like? Have you thought much about that? How you would say, like, I feel like I'm doing a really good job here.
That's a great question. I think overall, at a very high level, of course, success for me is partly tied to Darden's success. How is Darden viewed in the market? How are we doing from an admissions standpoint? Amongst our competitors, and I feel honored to try to play a small role in strengthening and with holding up that amazing brand that Darden has. So at a very high level, but tactically, for me, what success looks like is, I think on an individual level, again, making sure I feel like our students are thriving in the program, and, making sure that I am hopefully getting out ahead of anyone who's really struggling, that I'm seeing that either through, just being around, being available, or, and just through conversations, making sure that if I see someone who's having a hard time, or just, has a lot on their plate, that I'm there to help them kind of get back on track. And so at that individual level, I think it's just being supportive as much as I can. And then I think at the group level, I'll feel successful if I feel like we identified some new ideas or some improvements to the program that come directly from the students to enhance their experience. So much of what I love about Darden is that it's very student-led and student-governed. And so it's not us at the program team saying, you know what, you guys don't have this club, we're going to make it and we're going to hand it to you and you're going to take it from us. It's really about the students coming to us with needs that they have that we're not meeting, or just new ideas they're excited about. I've already had a couple students from the class of 21 with new interest group ideas that they want to launch. And, I'm in my role, I'm just here to hopefully be supportive, and of course make sure that what we're launching, is of interest to a meaningful portion of our students and fits within our kind of, our norms and our program mission. But, being that support role to help the students really create their own opportunities. And so it is nebulous, I agree, but I think if I look back, and across the class of 21, we helped them, really build some new experiences for themselves, some new networking opportunities to take the program to the next level. I mean, it's already, I think, a fantastic program, but what else can we be doing that's student-led to make it even stronger?
No, that's all fantastic. And I think from an admissions standpoint, I've long felt that admissions is really not possible without a great current student experience. So people oftentimes ask, what are we doing to recruit and all this kind of stuff? And I really do think the genesis of that is what happens in class, but also the extracurricular experience. If students are not getting what they want out of the program, if they do not feel supported while they're here, if they don't have great things to say about their experience, then admissions gets a lot harder at that point. And certainly, I think that's one of the people always ask us, like, why do you like working at Darden? Is that I personally feel like there's a great deal of alignment between what we say, what we're about, and what the actual experience is. And certainly credit to you for all the work that you're doing. I realize, from a student affairs standpoint, there's so much opportunity that's created by just having both sections here in Roslyn and seeing and feeling that energy. We are moments away, a couple hours or so from the first class of this weekend residency. We've already had some students filter in. We start at the very civilized time of noon on Friday. It's been kind of nice, to be honest with you. So have you enjoyed having all the students here in one place?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm really excited about the change. I think it was one of those, we heard where the need was and adjusted accordingly. And I think that this being in the DC metro area, there's so much opportunity, both from a professional development standpoint, networking, and personal life too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Charlottesville is an amazing place, but I think there's so much in DC that we can take advantage of, and I love having all of our students in one place. I really think that will strengthen that cohort community that they have with one another, and just like you said, gives us really exciting opportunities to bring interesting programming to them, or have them bring interesting programming to us in many cases, and bring in, business leaders to speak to them and things like that. So I think having that one cohort approach in Roslyn will really, I think, breathe new opportunity into the program.
And what an exciting weekend is planned. So we have, as we previously discussed, Love Night tonight. Then Saturday is a +1 event, which, we have previously done, and going back a few years now, we've done a sort of partner +1 type weekend down in Charlottesville. Kind of sat off to the side for a little while. It was a little bit difficult to figure out how to execute all of that recently. But I'm so excited to see this come back. Obviously, I think our students feel, as I mentioned previously, like, yes, they are the one in class, but everyone in their family is getting the MBA because it's all shared. It's all shared success and shared sacrifice, and it's great to see that programming ramping up.
Yeah, we're really excited about this weekend. The first on-grounds weekend, we sort of let students catch their breath and get to know one another. And then this weekend is when we throw a lot at them, but I think in a good way. So yeah, we've got club night tonight, where we've got all of our clubs coming in. As you mentioned, we're actually having alumni, so recent club leaders will be here as well. So that'll be a great networking opportunity. And then, as you said, we have our +1 dinner. And when I think about, I've talked about that student experience and making sure that we're kind of meeting the needs of our students. I wholeheartedly agree that goes beyond our students to that support network that I've mentioned, because they are they are going through this, and I think in some ways what they're going through might even be harder. It's different, but they're handling a lot, and so we want to make sure we're really inclusive and supportive of them. So we have the event tomorrow evening, and then I think throughout the experience for the class of 2021s, we'll certainly be looking for other opportunities to engage families, partners, friends, whatever we can do, and if there's grassroots interest for them to build their own community as well. We want to make sure we're supportive of that. So we've got that. And then we also, one other plug for what we're doing this weekend, on our second day, we have a second year panel. So we have a couple of our second years coming in to talk to our first years and just have an open forum with them to ask any questions. The second years are honestly one of the best resources for our new students. And so, we want to make sure that they can chat with them, meet with them, get their questions answered. Their first exam period's right around the corner. And so there's a lot of nerves and energy around that. So hopefully our second years can, kind of put their nerves at ease and give them some tips and a little bit of information. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, and now Sunday lunch is also a career topic. Right. If I'm not mistaken, I've been around some of the second year presentations, which have been great. Oftentimes, obviously Jim Collins, Sarita Stoltz, both friends of the podcast, they've been on here a few times. Got to get them back to talk a little bit more about this Sunday programming. But one of the things that's been kind of cool is to see even the students talk about things that they're working on. So I've been around for the second year presentation. So Brian Larson talked about his entrepreneurial venture, which has had a really exciting couple of years. I mean, it sounds like things are going really well for him. Karen Henneberger, who has a really fascinating background. One of my favorite admission stories from the past few years was admitted to the full-time residential program way back, so a number of years ago, and then came back around as a Darden Executive MBA applicant. She still had her letter of admission from when she applied, and I love that she also has a really cool job. She basically designs aircraft carriers and was talking about her career. They're fascinating people in this program. So it's great to see the sort of a content approach, but also just some of that story sharing, which, I think that's really empowering for people too. Yeah,
I think that's right. And one of the opportunities where I think that starts with the class is in Connie Dunlap's professional advancement course, which is such a fantastic opportunity. I think it's really unique that Darden has a course specifically dedicated to professional advancement. And the students kind of share their story and what they're looking for in terms of professional advancement, what they can offer their classmates. And I think it sparks a lot of great conversation and interest in hearing each other's stories. And as I said, that's that learning of, gosh, my classmates are all incredible and are, a lot of the value that I'll get out of this experience is meeting them, learning from them. And so I love that our students, want to hear from each other. And it's a great opportunity, too, to practice telling your story, whether it's professional or personal. We're thinking about launching something similar with the class of 21, where it's just an opportunity to hone your presentation skills, but also just to do some self-exploration and think about what is my story and what does make me unique. And it's a confidence booster, and it's great practice for when you're out there interviewing and networking with folks. So I think it's exciting when students kind of find those opportunities, and I love that our career center through the CDC and Connie's class are facilitating that with our students.
No lie. I run into a bunch of second years alumni as we do our recruitment sort of things around the country to a person. One, Connie Dunlop, I would say most beloved executive MBA faculty member. Two, when students always ask, what's going on? Any updates or any things like that? Our alumni always ask that too, and say, well, we've moved PAC to quarter one, the professional advancement course to quarter one, and they're like, oh man, that's such a great idea. It used to be in quarter five. A little bit of history lesson here. It used to be in quarter five, which was the midpoint of the program. And, students loved that class because it's introspective and you learn so much about yourself and you learn, about your classmates, and it's all sort of everybody talking about what they want to do, why they came here, sort of planning next steps, a lot of great stuff. So much value in sort of setting that course and having those conversations early in the program. I mean, this is about your career. That's why you're here. And so I will say a lot of envy. That people get to have that class with Connie early these days.
And I think it's also, it makes sense. It's on everyone's mind, right? When they come here, so many people, I think we've probably talked about in past podcasts now, the Executive MBA is attracting more and more people who are switching careers, not just climbing within their current career. And so to get out ahead of that and really help people along the journey makes a ton of sense. I will say that I'm anticipating that patience conversation might come into play more and more, though, because I think it's opening everyone's eyes up to all of these amazing possibilities, which is fantastic and what we should be doing. And I think it'll also challenge our students to be patient with their career transitions and things like that. But I think it's absolutely the right thing, and people are really excited about it. Yeah.
Well, it certainly keeps things interesting for you.
Yes.
That's the great thing about student work is, yes, there's a lot of commonality, but every student's situation is unique.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking time on
Brad.
obviously a busy residency weekend. So looking forward to this weekend. It's great having our newest students here again for their second weekend residency. Yeah. I even got to make a playlist for the +1 event, which I'm very excited about. It's been Allison Price approved, so I'm pumped about it.
That's the ultimate approval. I should have had you make our club night playlist, because that one might be more interesting.
So, well, thank you so
you
much for your time. It's great hearing your insights. Obviously, we're thrilled you're here at Darden, and thanks for all the work you do supporting our students.
Oh, thank you, Brad. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts, and you make my job a lot more easier and fun, because we have such fantastic students here that I absolutely love working with them. And so thank you for all that you do in admissions.
Thank you. And that was my conversation with Laura Bordoni, a member of our Executive MBA program team who works closely with the students in our class of 2021. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at Darden.Virginia.edu. And until next time, thanks for listening.